What is up, everybody? The Bengals got some things in the works, right? A couple of big deals on the horizon for the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm Anthony Cosenza. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network, and brought to you in part by both CincyJungle.com and FOCO, the fans-only company. So we're happy to be here on Saturday evening. Some of you, I know, I follow a number of people that watch this show or do that kind of stuff. I know you've been celebrating St. Patty's Day, and I know some of this stuff might be a little bit premature, but hey, I'm rolling with some credible people, and we're going to talk about the deals that are reportedly quote unquote done for T. Higgins and Jamar Chase to keep them in Cincinnati long term. Again, I'm Anthony Cosenza. This is the Orange and Black Insider. Get this podcast on your favorite audio streamer, whether that is iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. Again, BLEAV, different spelling. You got to go get that channel, and our show's on there. Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends is on there. 3 and Out is on there with Jason and Kevin. And, of course, Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz. But this is a celebratory weekend for the Cincinnati Bengals. And nothing is officially announced, but I'm rolling with, as I said, a very credible source and a guy I like to consider a friend from afar, and that is James Rapien of Sports Illustrated and the great Locked On Bengals podcast, where his sources have told him that these deals for both T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are quote unquote basically done. Probably some dotting of the I's, crossing of the T's, that sort of thing, minor details to be worked out. But this has been a long time in the making, and that is an understatement. The Bengals have tried to get a long-term deal in place with T. Higgins. They did the franchise tag 2 years in a row. This year is really a security measure to make sure that he doesn't get a ton of people vying for his services on the open free agency market. And they have reportedly now got things going with both of these guys. And I would expect if in fact everything is going according to plan and according to reports, I would expect by Monday we'll probably have some sort of a press conference. Now, we have yet to obviously, again, an official announcement by the team and official numbers and all that kind of stuff, but reports out there from James Rapien and others, and we're talking Ian Rappaport, we're talking Adam Schefter, etc. The average annual values in total for both of these guys looks to be at about $70 million. We're looking at maybe 28 to 30 million a year for T. Higgins and probably 40 or a little bit more million a year for Jamar Chase on these deals. We have no idea how many years and all that kind of thing, but the Bengals over the past handful of seasons have somehow been able to manage to keep Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase in Cincinnati for the long term, which has been a goal of Joe Burrow's, the organizations. You can go back to last year when these talks were ramping up with Jamar Chase, and Mike Brown said, we're going to bend over backwards, was the quote, to make sure that we get Chase's deal done. And so the Bengals now, after a slow I don't want to call it disappointing. I labeled it kind of maybe uninspiring free agency period. They now have cemented a couple of deals for two of their star players on offense to keep them there long term. And look, there are questions that come with big contracts like that. We know that, but these are things that had to be done. And I kind of want to start here because I think it's so funny that the Bengals were chastised, by myself included, but chastised nationally, raked over the coals about what are you doing? You're not getting outside help, and also you haven't paid your stars. And now the talking points have become, you have so much money on offense. How do you fix the defense, et cetera, et cetera? So it's like, man, you just can't win with if you're the Cincinnati Bengals and what you're trying to achieve in outside free agency or free agency in general. And so, there's a lot to dissect here. Now, some good news on the T. Higgins thing. Obviously, we have to see the contract breakdown and everything, but some good news is that franchise tag number that the cap hit that he would be seeing, or the team would be seeing this season, if he was to play on that tag and not a long-term extension, that will likely drop, but based on structures, et cetera. So that in itself, and CincyJungle.com has an article up on the, relaying James Rapine's report. It looks like the Bengals may be, because of Jamar Chase's fifth-year option and because of the tag that Higgins was set to play on, it looks like close to $48 million may be saved against the cap for the Bengals this year based on extensions and how they structure those things. So that is really good news as well. And look, it's frustrating, and I'm with all of you. It's frustrating that they have not been more aggressive in outside free agency to help out, namely the guard spots, maybe more help on the interior of the defensive line and some other spots on defense. I get it, but I do, and it's not a good excuse, but I do understand the reasoning that they want to understand what the numbers are for this year and other years going forward, cementing these two guys in the team's long-term plans. You want to understand what the cap implications are, what the cash implications are, so that you can then go out and get, some more veterans to help you out. So this is, again, big news for the Cincinnati Bengals. If you have been watching this show for any length of time, and really since, even if you're somewhat new and have followed this show since the Bengals began this whole T. Higgins saga, which has dragged out even longer, really, than the Jamar Chase saga. I don't like to be the guy that, beats my chest, breaks my arm by patting myself on the back, but I have held the stance that the Bengals are a team that pays their wide receivers. And if you look back in history, even when in the dark days when players were disgruntled, they stuck around because the Bengals ended up paying them well. You can go back to Carl Pickens. You can go back to the mid 2000s with Ocho and TJ Hushmanzada. Those are guys that they paid to stick around. They like to pay multiple wide receivers. That is a position that they value. Maddening that they don't necessarily value guard as much, right? But still, the Bengals, and I have maintained the stance that the Bengals would keep both of these guys. Chase was kind of a foregone conclusion. It was really just about making him the highest paid non-quarterback player in the league, and that is what the reports are being said, that he is going to now surpass the new deal that Myles Garrett got that made him the highest non-paid quarterback to stay in Cleveland. The reports are Chase will surpass that. And again, nothing to sneeze at with T. Higgins' deal either. If it is reported to be in that $28 to $30 million range, that the Bengals love their wide receivers, and they recognize when they have star players in the building to, to keep them long term. And maybe, again, a lot of stuff still to be, ink to paper, all that kind of stuff. A lot of stuff to still be done here. But if these are indeed done, which I believe that they are based on the sources that were quoted, this is a deal where maybe the Bengals looked back at the Carson Palmer situation and said, we can't allow this to happen again. I don't know that Joe Burrow would ever be that guy. I don't know that he would demand a trade, especially after his mega deal and all of that. But maybe they looked themselves in the mirror and said, we cannot we cannot ignore what Joe Burrow has requested and what he has openly told us that he has wanted in terms of these guys staying in Cincinnati and being Bengals for the long term. These guys have opened the Super Bowl window. They got to a Super Bowl with both of these guys, the wide receivers and their quarterback, obviously. And so they realize that these guys are key to keeping that Super Bowl window open. But regardless, the Bengals have now extended their quarterback long-term, big contract there. Reportedly are basically done with mega extensions to the star wide receivers on their team. And now they have some more work to do to improve other parts of their roster. And they are looking to the draft as well, although they only have 6 picks. So that's going to be it's going to be tricky to see how they kind of maneuver all of that. There's a little bit more financial and draft constraints with which they have to navigate through. So again, this is a big deal for the Bengals, a team that has routinely been labeled fair or unfair as quote unquote cheap. These are positions they traditionally pay well, and they pay multiple players there well. I'm going to probably put up an article on cincyjungle.com kind of chronicling some of the contracts to wide receivers that they have doled out. And if you've been a listener or watcher of this show for any amount of time, you can go back to that Marvin Lewis era where it was, Levi Jones, and they signed Willie Anderson, and they signed, guys they value and guys they know are their stars. For the most part, they pay them. And, some of those other guys have left previously because of a lack of team success or, age, that sort of thing. This is not an issue with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, right smack in the prime of their respective great careers. So this is a really, really big pivotal point for the Bengals franchise in a number of different ways. And I go back to, I think it's just incredibly ironic that even when they reportedly have these deals done, the talking point pivots from, wow, Bengals are cheap. They're going to let these guys walk. They're going to, now they overpaid too much on offense. I think it's just pretty funny, but I am with a lot of you. I'm getting a lot of comments here. I'm trying to get through all of these here, but yes, I'm with all of you. They need to shore up some trench guys. They need to do some different things and make sure that Joe is protected. But if you go back to the stretch where the Bengals nearly made the playoffs last year and they strung together those wins to end the season, Joe Burrow played out of his mind last year. We know that, but these guys were critical. And if you go back to that Denver Broncos game, man, Higgins was an animal in that one. Chase was all over the place in a number of different wins there at the end of the year. So these guys are critical. They're critical. Now, I'm also getting a lot of comments about, okay, what about Trey Hendrickson? What's next there? All of that. We do have a video up on YouTube. I was graciously asked by Jeff Trenopole of the Sports with Strawberry Ice program, and I wanted to have our viewers see it as well. But this is a little different from national media members, etc. But there was a listener on there who has a realtor friend, a real estate agent friend who apparently is showing Trey Hendrickson and his wife houses in the Cincinnati area, maybe pointing to them staying long term in Cincinnati. I don't know about the legs to that. I don't know. I don't know why someone would maybe throw that out there willy-nilly, but I mean, there's fake X accounts and all kinds of stuff for insiders that people get duped on. So I'm not going to go with that and run with that. I'm just throwing that out there. I tend to believe, and now as more and more time goes on, and you hear less and less about teams willing to give up a king's ransom for Trey Hendrickson in terms of they're willing to pay him. They're not willing to give up the draft capital, apparently, that the Bengals are asking in return for Trey Hendrickson to go elsewhere. And so I thought as the legal tampering period kind of was going on and there wasn't a lot of legs to Trey Hendrickson moving elsewhere, I kind of thought like, hey, he's staying. Now, is he staying on the current contract? Is he getting an extension as well? I don't know. Regardless, I do still think it is a weak excuse if the Bengals are saying, hey, we're focusing on the wide receivers. We're focusing on Trey Hendrickson. The outside free agents in that respect, at least splashier signings, are taking a back seat. I don't know. I don't know what the Bengals' plans are with Trey, but I think as more and more time passes, unless this gets really ugly and close to the draft, I see a situation where he stays. He stays in Cincinnati in one avenue or another. So that would be a win for them as well. Less needs going into the draft. We know when the Bengals go into the draft, they attack free agency with needs, and they go to the draft for best player available and or develop guys that they think they can develop into future starters. So I think Trey Hendrickson stays. Stranger things have happened. We will see what happens with him. But as of now, there's not much to that. That's probably the next step in this process, where the Bengals lock in these two deals with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and then they work on some things with Trey and move forward from there. So it's important to note as well. I mean, I think people are looking at the Trey Hendrickson thing a little bit like almost as if he's kind of a version of a free agent, where it's like, oh, he can just kind of go. And the Bengals kind of have that control over Trey Hendrickson's future because of the year that he has left on his current deal. Maybe they extend it, a thing where it's a 2-3 year deal and it includes this year, and then he's in Cincinnati for the next 2-3 years, that sort of thing. That's probably where they would like to see it. And there are not any semblances of Trey Hendrickson falling off of a cliff production wise, knock on wood. So this is a guy that I'm sure they would like to keep in Cincinnati if it makes sense for everybody. Jared Campbell, and we got a lot of live viewers. Good to see all of you. Hopefully you're enjoying your St. Patty's Day weekend. Any word on Tevin Jenkins? The latest on him is that he is going to Seattle. Rumors have it that the Bengals are a little scared off, not only on the price tag, but his injury history as well, which is understandable. They've been burned in outside free agency in the past. So if they maybe learned a lesson from the Carson Palmer saga, maybe they've also crawled in their shell a little bit in terms of outside free agency with guys that have injury history. I tweeted this out a little bit ago. I don't think Jenkins is going to be the guy for Cincinnati because of that. I think the price tag is too high for a position they do not value all that highly. And I think there's maybe some other options out there. Maybe they think they can get a day one starter in the draft, whether that is Tate Ratledge, the Booker kid out of Alabama, whoever that may be. Maybe that's where they end up pivoting. But I do think one guy that they would probably, and there are injury issues here as well, but I think Will Hernandez makes some sense for the Bengals on a short-term deal because he has played and started at both guard spots in the NFL. And that might not blow your hair back in terms of a signing, but maybe that is a capable starter. He's kind of in the middle / later part of his career, but had some nice years, had some moments with injuries and other stuff where you go, I don't know about this guy, but I think because of the versatility to play either guard position, we know the Bengals love offensive line versatility. They get guys that can play guard and tackle, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it does not work out at all. But I think a guy that can play either guard position like Will Hernandez makes some sense. Then maybe you look in the draft. I know a lot of us want the Bengals to sign 2 veteran guards on the outside free agent market and then maybe go into the draft for another developmental guy, but I don't know that that's their plan. So we will see. Dalton Reisner's still out there. I see my guy Pork Chop. By the way, Chop, you are shedding some weight, my friend. You're looking svelte in the pictures. I hope you and the Bengals and Brews boys had a good time at your live event today. But anyway, Scherf. A lot of people are saying Brandon Scherf. He's been primarily a right guard, so you'd have to kind of say, okay, that's where we're planting him, and then you draft potentially a left guard. Reisner, I've called him kind of the free agent mercenary. He kind of has embraced the Darrelle Revis mindset with free agency, where he takes these kind of rental deals, and then he's kind of waiting in the weeds, and someone picks him up late, and then he ends up being a pretty effective player for some teams. So I think that might be a guy, and he's been primarily a left guard as well. And then, James Hawley says, I think Cody Ford played all over the line. That's why they brought him back. He's played tackle. He's played guard. That's a guy that they I don't know that you want to have him as necessarily your starter right now, but obviously a valuable guy off the bench to play a number of different spots should you need him to. So there are other positions that the Bengals need to address in free agency if, in fact, which we all believe this is the case, that these deals for the wide receivers are done. But might there just be, and this is again kind of worrisome, because the Bengals have stumbled when they kind of get a little overconfident in what they have and all these kinds of things. We've seen that kind of bite them at times. But might they be of the mindset that, hey, we're gonna play now that Hubbard is retired? You got Joseph Osai back, you got Camp Sample back, you have Miles Murphy on the roster, who's been kind of a rotator backup guy. Might the Bengals say, new defensive coordinator, bring back some of these guys that have been waiting in the wings and not played a bunch, and give them more snaps, and they will be productive? Joseph Osai had a really good end to the season. Camp Sample is a versatile player that you like to have as a rotating player on your roster as well. He's kind of that third down, passing down. You can kick him inside and he can be effective, and he's done some nice things for the Bengals. So is it kind of, hey, we're waiting for these players to develop and we're going to give them bigger roles, and with a new defensive coordinator and new voice, that's going to do it? I think that's a risky proposition if you're not really going to do anything else in outside free agency, but it's possible that these guys do turn a corner here. Joseph Osai, in his press conference, introductory or reintroductory press conference to the team after signing the 1-year deal, $7 million, he made a really poignant statement that I think has been glossed over a little bit. And that was essentially something to the effect of, we didn't buy in as a defense until the last 5 games. So I don't really know what he meant by that directly. I don't know if they tuned Lou out at the beginning of the season and through most of the season. I don't know if Lou made things too complicated and they were like, we cannot perform here. I don't know if it was because some of the younger guys got more of a chance towards the end of the season, performed pretty well, turned a corner, gained some confidence, and that's where it was. I am really intrigued as to what Joseph Osai meant by that comment. And it could be a number of different things. It could be a combination of all the things that I mentioned. So Yeah, I mean, and some other people here, a couple people, Chris Brandenburg and others saying, said Johnson really showed some flashes towards the end of the year. Another good depth piece there. The Bengals need another disruptive interior defensive lineman. They could use edge rush help, especially with still Trey Hendrickson's future technically still in the air. I think that's, you can never have enough good pass rushers to place along the line. And that's where the Bengals have to focus along with offensive guard. I do think now, once these deals are in place, you have the structure of them. The guard situation may even wait until, if now the focus pivots to Trey Hendrickson, it may still even wait until that is settled. And then that's when they go out and get some outside help for guard. We all have to also remember that the consensus opinion of this free agency class was that it was one of the weaker ones in recent memory in terms of splashy guys on the market, in terms of impact guys on the market, the mega deals, all that kind of stuff. And I think, well, I know that's why the Bengals felt extra urgency this time around with T. Higgins, placing the franchise tag, protecting themselves from losing him. He would have gone in a heartbeat. He would have gone in a heartbeat on the open market. We all know that despite the injury stuff, he would have gone. I mean, PFF and other outlets labeled him as the top free agent that was going to become available. So the Bengals played this the right way. They appease their 2-star wide receivers. Yeah, it's a long time coming. Yeah, probably some, if not most, of the other teams in the NFL would have settled this a lot earlier. Yeah, the Bengals probably paid more in these contracts by waiting longer, but they've appeased their star wide receivers. They've appeased their star quarterback. They keep their offensive core intact for the foreseeable future. And now, with some of the other players that they brought back, namely Samaje Perine, I mentioned they re-signed Sample, they re-signed Osai. They're kind of going to try re-sign BJ Hill. They're going to try and run it back in some respects in 21 and 22. So that is kind of where things stand at this point. I'm seeing some more comments now about, okay, what happens with Pratt? My prediction is that I don't think there's a really, this isn't an indictment on the player. It's more a little bit about the position and that sort of thing and his current contract. But I think that probably waits in terms of a possible trade or that sort of thing until closer to the draft. The Bengals may put feelers because now things start to die down a little bit in terms of the frenzy of free agency. The first week or so, teams kind of wait and they get a little more patient. And then things really pick back up draft weekend in terms of trade talks and that sort of thing. So for me right now, unless there is a pressing player and they feel like, hey, we have to free up this money by trading Pratt, and this is kind of where the highest value will be that we can get for him. I see that being a situation maybe by the draft, and then they get picks or a pick this year, hopefully, if they were to deal him. I am interested in the idea, how would Pratt perform with Al Golden as the defensive coordinator? Will we see? We already know they signed Oren Burks and they signed TJ Slayton, two guys that are known for tackling and run stopping, that sort of thing. I think this is a back to basics, at least the first part of free agency for the Bengals. I am interested to see if they do hang on to Pratt, if and how his performance would potentially elevate with Al Golden as the defensive coordinator. James Hawley says, yeah, Logan Wilson coming back. Yeah, so that's going to help you too. But that, that element, I think goes a little overlooked. Pratt had some good, had good performances when Golden was the linebackers coach. And so maybe he's not on the trading block. Maybe even though he seems a little bit frustrated with things and perceptions of his play, that sort of thing, based on cryptic X tweets that he puts out there, maybe the best avenue for him and the team is to keep him here under Al Golden. And so maybe that's where the Bengals are again banking on, a little bit of a turn in improvement. So we'll see what happens at that position. I know some other people are mentioning Chidobe Awuzie being released by the Titans, playing under, Brian Callahan there for a year, and being released there. So I don't know if a rental deal there as a veteran corner in a pretty young cornerback room. I don't know if that makes sense for the Bengals, especially if the financials line up. I think Cheeto really liked his time in Cincinnati, but obviously that injury in 23, right? That injury, really kind of set him back a little bit. He wasn't the impact player on that Titans team that he was for the Bengals, but the Titans team was pretty awful this last year too. So, you can kind of take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. There are other players out there. I see Jared Campbell asking about Zadarius Smith. I see other people, a lot of people have been mentioning Calais Campbell. I think Calais Campbell, I don't know how much he's going to give you on the field, but I know he is a great locker room guy and a guy who has seen a long track record of success in the NFL, not only as on an individual basis, but as a team basis as well. So that may be a guy they look at here. But look, the Bengals are in if this does indeed come to fruition, which we all expect it to in terms of the contracts to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, they are in a much better spot than when they started free agency. There's a little bit of an understanding, I guess, as to why, the focus hasn't been so outward as opposed to inward. Still, I do think that's a weak excuse. I do understand that this free agent class isn't as strong as others out there. So, and maybe they feel that they can get day one starters at IDL or day one rotators at IDL, starters at guard in the draft. You only have 6 picks to play with, though, so you can't really mess around with those. You can't really whiff on those this year if that's the route that you are going to take. I've said this a couple times on a number of different avenues, but I was on a media conference call with Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network draft analyst. He had in this year's class 24 defensive linemen with potential starter grades. The year prior, he had 12. So if you're the Bengals and you're looking at edge rusher and IDL, maybe that's the risk you're willing to take to get players that can come in and impact right away, as opposed to, diving into free agency for some of these guys that have had some injury stuff or that sort of thing. I think they are scared to death of a lot of players that have some form of an injury history, which is a little bit ironic because of, T. Higgins missing a handful of games every year in his career, really, but still, that's the devil they know. And he's a guy who produces at a high level with the Bengals and with Joe Burrow. I also want to bring this back up. You've probably heard me say this before too. The history between Joe Burrow and T. Higgins goes back to before they were even teammates. Bengals. They worked out in that COVID year, actually right down the street from where I live, with Jordan Palmer and these the QB Summit thing that has now become a behemoth. But they worked out together down here. And I am of the mindset, I don't think it's ever been directly said, but I'm of the mindset that when they drafted Joe, hey, give us some ideas on wide receivers, et cetera. Of course, he probably talked about his LSU teammates, Terrace Marshall and Justin Jefferson. But I think him working out with T. Higgins said, hey, you got to look at this guy. I think he can do a lot of different things and that can help this offense. And that has been the case since. So this rapport between Higgins and Joe Burrow was well before they were, a little bit before they were teammates on the Cincinnati Bengals. They built that rapport together out here in Southern California, where they worked out with Jordan Palmer and a number of other high-profile prospects. It's a pretty cool thing that they do down here. In case you're unfamiliar with it, Josh Allen works out. You've seen Aaron Rodgers come down here and work out. So it's a pretty cool deal. But regardless, I'll just repeat it again. The Bengals appear to have mega extensions around the total of $70 million AAV for T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. They will be shaving quite a bit of cap room, it would seem, by not having T. Higgins play on the franchise tag and kind of retweaking the 5th-year option for Jamar Chase. So that's a big deal, as well as having him in Cincinnati long term. And now they can kind of focus on some other efforts. You'd like to see him. You would have liked to have seen them be able to focus on some other things as well. They did bring in a couple of other guys, obviously, but you'd like to see them be a little bit more aggressive on things. But maybe they have some ideas in place. They have some feelers out to some players on the outside market that they think, hey, we just got to get these things done, and then we're going to come to your camp and work on that. But regardless, the one bucket of cold water on this whole thing is a little bit, and I go back to what I said about the Bengals potentially making a risky banking on Golden's the answer, giving the new guys some time is the answer for improvement, but there's not, it's been a lot of retain. You got guys back. I don't know how much better, if at all, this roster is from last year. You have your stars in place. You got to figure out Trey. You got some guys back. You added a couple pieces on defense. P. Ryan's back to help you with pass pro and versatility from the running back position. But my question always this time of year is, how are you better? And how much better are you? And so I don't know how much better the Bengals are at this point in time. I do think that these deals getting done, though, finally, permeates in that locker room. This has been a cloud over the locker room, not only for these two guys, DJ Reader, Jesse Bates leaving, all that kind of stuff. This has been a cloud over the Bengals and their, the players in that locker room about, man, are they going to reward performance? What are they doing? And so now that could permeate in the locker room, give it a little bit of an air of and who knows how much these issues kind of seeped into the beginning part of this season, right? The lack of a long-term deal for either wide receiver, and Trey Hendrickson also had some gripes at the beginning of the beginning of the spring last year as well, and that went away pretty quickly. So I don't know how much that seeped into and potentially affected the poor start for the Bengals, but hopefully not only cementing your star players staying in Cincinnati, hopefully showing the other players in that locker room, hey, we are rewarding the star players and we are rewarding performances, high performances for our team. Yeah, it took longer than a lot of people wanted or expected, but getting done. So, Ruzilla here says, why does the cap savings for this year matter if they're not going to sign more external free agents? That's a good question. You'd probably want to ask ownership that. To me, I think you should have the bandwidth and the resources to be able to focus in on these deals, do what you need to do, and also still understand where you are in terms of the cap, in terms of the cash and all of that, to say we're going to be proactive in outside free agency too, while signing our star players internally. Why that hasn't really happened, I don't know. The only logical explanation I can say is that, they really wanted to make sure that they have this is a notoriously slow moving, very, careful franchise when it comes to financials, and that's not cheap. Do not mistake that for that. They want to have the clearest picture possible so that they are not. The one thing the Bengals are never in is cap trouble, right? I mean, you never hear that, we're against the cap, and so they always want to avoid that. I think they really wanted to have a clear picture. This is my guess. They probably really wanted to have a clear picture on what these contracts look like and say, okay, what can we play with? We hear all the time about the rookie pool. We hear all the time about all these different things. A lot of it is really phantom excuses where, I mean, a lot smarter than me who break down the cap and financials and all that can provide a clearer picture on that. But for the most part, my thinking of it is, it's a careful franchise when it comes to this stuff. They prioritize their internal stars. That's where they focused, for better or for worse. And they want to make sure that they are in sound shape going forward financially, and then, kind of tinkering with the roster and do what they need to do. So yeah, Jeremy Quinn's, their lawyers. Yeah. I mean, they pay attention to things. That is true. That is true. They move at a snail's pace. Sometimes they do, but they did not move at a snail's pace with the T. Higgins tag thing to protect themselves and be able to keep him. They pounced pretty quickly on that, which was a smart move, as we now see that he reportedly is basically done with his contract extension, as is Jamar Chase. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. Somehow I've rambled on for 40 minutes, and I don't really know how that happened, but we have a lot of live viewers across a number of different platforms. As I mentioned, you can get this show on your favorite audio streamer, whether that is iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the major ones on the Believe in Cincy podcast channel, BLEAV. And go check that out. Leave us a review, subscribe. You have to resubscribe to our new audio feed, not the old Cincy Jungle one. That one is defunct. So please do so at your earliest convenience. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Orange and Black Insider. Real easy, youtube.com/BengalsOBI. So go subscribe to that. We've got some cool interviews and different stuff that have been coming down the pike recently. And then we've got some more stuff teeing up for you coming up here. And of course, keep it to cincyjungle.com for your news, opinions, and updates. And John Sheeran, my usual co-host, who hopefully he has been enjoying some form of a St. Paddy's Day celebration today on a much needed Saturday off. Go check out what he does at A to Z Sports as well. Kudos to James Rapine for breaking the scoop that the extensions are quote unquote done per sources for Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. I would expect Monday or Tuesday, if this is, where it's going, I would expect probably a Monday or Tuesday press conference with those guys, and probably together. And so that's my guess. I don't know. But happy Saturday to you all. Some good news for the Cincinnati Bengals. More work to be done by them, to be sure, not only in free agency, but the draft. And hopefully they now kind of pivot and make some more necessary moves to bolster their roster and get back to Super Bowl aspirations in 2025. Happy Saturday to you all. Happy early St. Paddy's Day to you all. As always, be safe out there, celebrating, have some fun, but be safe. And I appreciate, we have a lot of people tuning in on Saturday evening. I appreciate all of you tuning in live, all of you after the fact. It's just me, the dummy, not the brains of the operation, John. So sorry you had to deal with just me. But regardless, I appreciate all of you. All of you take care. Be safe this St. Paddy's Day weekend. And we'll be back with more on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. Take care. Have a great rest of your weekend.